Winter has always been a time for gathering in the longhouse and sharing information around the fire. This is our contribution to that tradition. Hello, I'm Evan from Hill People Gear. For those of you who might have come to this video via sort of another vector, Hill People Gear is a small company that designs and builds backpacks in the U.S. out of U.S. materials. And what I do for Hill People Gear mostly is design gear and some marketing stuff like this as well, and some other responsibilities. For those of you who know Hill People Gear, this longhouse video is going to be a little bit of a departure in some ways from the longhouse videos we've done in the past that focus on backcountry travel and practical backcountry skills. But when you think about it, it's, if you're backpacking is what I do primarily. As a backpacker, it's all about being in an environment, self-reliant, moving through it, and sort of being able to take care of yourself. And I've never been much of a wilderness survival guy, although I know those things. I have some of those skills. But if you think about it from that perspective, what's an extension of backpacking? What's an extension of wilderness survival? How much infrastructure does it really take? This notion of the lone guy wandering the wilderness, making whatever he needs, subsisting on what he can find, is really just fantasy. The fur trappers, those brigades, when they went west every year, that was like dozens and dozens of guys, thousands of pounds of cargo, all kinds of food, and they still starved every winter. So, this notion of like, okay, how are we in the environment, and how much infrastructure do we need? How much infrastructure is enough? What does that look like? Is kind of what this project behind me is about. So when I was a young man, like really my only plan, I was in college, my only plan was, once I got out of college, buy a piece of land, build a place, and then figure out the rest of my life. And then I met a girl while I was a firefighter, and then I entered the normal world, I guess you should say. Well, fast forward many, many years, and my wife and I were at a crossroads, sort of, and we had this little place back here just as a kind of weekend getaway, and we thought, let's make it real. Let's do this experiment. Let's figure out what it actually takes to live here. Is it a place of preparedness? Well, you don't really know until you've lived with it. You don't really know until you've gone through some time with it. And so then I embarked on this project to build this place out so that it was truly livable, and to see how much I needed, really. How much does it take to make us happy? What I'm going to show you here, it's certainly a much better standard of living than much of the world enjoys, and certainly by the standards of human history, it's luxury. I've got hot running water in this building over here that you can't see, just at the turn of a tap, which is really a tremendous luxury. But on the other hand, it's primitive by contemporary U.S. standards. We have an outhouse. We don't have an indoor bathroom. And, there's a lot of ways in which we're very subject to nature and the even temperature fluctuations, all those sorts of things. So I've learned a lot. We spent a winter here, and then a year not here, and now we're back here, have been since August. So we've been through the heat of the summer as well as a full winter, and now we're entering another winter up here. And so I intend to do this video in 3 phases. This will be an overview, and then I want to do one on the water system and one on the energy system. But the overview, I'll talk some of the lessons, general lessons I've learned, kind of show you what the place is about, and also just some principles, some lessons learned. So the first thing that you really have to understand, there's no such thing as off-grid. It doesn't exist. You always have dependencies. It's just a question of what your dependencies are and how long of a time frame you have until you hit those dependencies. I'm dependent on propane for some of what goes on here. To the extent I'm not dependent upon propane, dependent upon firewood that has to be gathered somehow. Don't have a well, so I'm dependent on the community coin-operated well. I got to haul water from the well to the cistern. And then funny things like this really nice composting toilet. After, 4 years of continuous running, the vent fan went out. Well, then I had a dependency on a fan that had to come from Sweden. Now, I could have figured something else out with a rotor at the top of the stack or whatever. At the time, it was more expedient to buy this fan, but that's an example of a dependency. So it's really just like, what are your dependencies and how long until you hit that wall, and what's your plan for resupplying, based on, whatever your dependencies are. So the first thing, when I'm talking about building an emergency shelter in the backcountry, I always say the location of your shelter matters more than the construction of the shelter itself. And I think the same thing's true here. So we're sitting at 6,800 feet in a location that pushes 300 days of sun a year. So the solar stuff in general is pretty easy, pretty plentiful. It's an arid environment. That makes a big difference. I think we're not fighting things that elsewise we would fight. The precipitation obviously is pretty low, which means that water is a problem where it might not be elsewhere. We're far enough north that, depending upon the winter, there could be snow on the ground for weeks at a time. The last time we wintered up here, it came and it went, and it came and it went. But sort of the overall temperature envelope matters. There are nights in the winter here, every winter, when it's below, when it flirts with zero. Below zero weather up here is pretty rare. Conversely, in the summer, there are days when the highs are in the 90s. So that becomes its own kind of problem. So I oriented everything facing south. You want that classic southern exposure for solar gain. It keeps all the walkways clear thanks to the heat and the sun in the winter. As you can tell by the wind chimes and the noise around me, wind's always moving up here, almost always moving. So when I had the cabin, and actually I'll go sideways into this. This could be a long video and a lot of talking. I'll do my best to show you some stuff, but essentially what we have here is 3 sheds. They are, you could think of them as portable buildings. You could think of them as RVs without wheels in terms of how they're constructed, but there's a good Amish dude who owns a business down in town where he builds sheds to spec, and so these are sheds that were built to my spec that simply combination me and a fella who I hired to help me finished out on the inside. And so theoretically, although it would be a monumental undertaking, could load these things back on the truck that they came on and put them in another location and have the same setup. But at any rate, so the cabin, my wife wanted barn style, which is certainly less energy efficient, but it's nice. It provides us a loft with an extra sleeping mattress, which is good for when I'm snoring. I get to go up to the loft so that my wife can sleep peacefully. But because I had that vaulted ceiling with loft, I put a window in at each end so that this constant cross breeze would ventilate, and particularly in the more temperate months would cool the place off. I've also got windows facing each other on each side of the building and on each end of the building, and in fact a screen door which does a lot of the same function as well. So that building can be opened up and really ventilated easily, and it works pretty doggone well. Then in the center is our little outhouse, which with a separate composting toilet slash power building. And when I go into the energy, I'll go way more into the power building side of it. And then over here is, I should say, this like most complex systems, has evolved, right? I had ideas in my head, and the place has evolved. The first power that was ever on the place was nothing more than like 100 watts of solar to run the vent fan for the bathroom. And from there it turned into 12 volt in the cabin. And then when the decision was made to actually live up here and see what that was about, then I put in a lot more solar, put in some inverters, and then so in the what we call the bathhouse over here, in the bathhouse we have alternating current running off of inverters and a huge battery bank, all of which is in the outhouse back here. A third of the bathhouse is plumbed bathhouse with a shower and a sink. 2/3 of it is my shop and garage. So the 1/3 is finished and the 2/3 is unfinished. So that's kind of the three main buildings. And we have 2,200 watts of solar. We have 750 gallon cistern with an above ground pump that's in my shop. There's things that have to be done to keep all that running. Again, I'll go into that in more detail. And the pump / expansion tank pressurizes the one. I have all the plumbing on one single wall in the bathhouse, so it's easy to heat. Easy to keep that wall warm. So what are some general principles? Southern facing exposure, thinking about where your wind is. All of our weather comes from the west, just about, some of the southwest, but mostly the west. So the bathhouse protects our living area, which honestly is the space between these buildings. And like I said, the wind's always moving. And kind of that's it as far as the basic infrastructure. We live in a little 1 in 40 acre, well, it's not a neighborhood, everybody's got 40 acres, but there is an HOA for nothing more than maintaining the roads. So we have a nice gravel road that literally wraps around the backside of our building. I could have built way out in the center of the property, but that would have required a lot of money to run a good gravel road out, put the pads out there. Instead, we're 20 feet off of the gravel road that's maintained by the community, and we got kind of a gravel parking area back there, and that works out pretty well. So some principles that I've learned. Anything you can do underground, get it done underground. Thermal mass is a thing, and having to heat and cool these above ground structures to the extent that my plumbing's above ground, all of that just requires a monumental expenditure of energy compared to anything that could get done below ground. So, if I were like, okay, cost is no object, and I'm starting from scratch, I'd probably be looking to build an earth house, honestly, just because there's so much efficiency you get from digging into the ground where you don't even have to generate solar to get a lot of your stuff done like we do. Another thing, small is beautiful, right? The bigger the space, the harder it is to heat, the harder it is to cool, the more energy you need to use, period, for your space. So, getting away with kind of as small as you can is a great principle to follow. And what's it like? What is it like? So I like going outside to the outhouse most of the time, knowing what the moon was doing in the middle of the night, knowing if there was wind moving in the middle of the night, pausing to look up at the Milky Way. That's really great. We just had 5 days of just drizzle, and I didn't like that, right? I put on a raincoat to go to the bathroom, which in the middle of the night is kind of jarring, particularly when it gets colder. My wife does not really like going out to the outhouse, not because she's not tough, because I've seen her bare footprints in snow out here, but because it wakes her up too much. You come out and it's 15 degrees. If you were sleepy before, that wakes you up a little bit. It's hard to get back to sleep. So, there's pros and cons there. Because we don't run heat in the cabin all night, I didn't have a wood stove last time. I've got all the parts in. I'll have a wood stove this winter. I do have a good propane furnace that I'll turn on sometimes. On really cold nights, when I get up to go to the bathroom at like 3 in the morning, I'll turn it on so it has warmed up to like maybe 50 by the time we get out of bed. But like last night, I didn't do that. It got down to 27 outside, and when we woke up at 6, it was at 42 inside the cabin. All of that triggers your natural animal, not behavior, instincts, I guess. In the winter, we tend to hibernate. Sun's not up. It's 40 degrees in the cabin. Doesn't matter if it's like 6:30 or 7 a.m., which normally would be like 2 hours after we were up. Every instinct says, be in bed, stay in bed, and sleep. And the same thing's true at night. You know, temperature's dropping. You're not in a big old house where you feel apart from what's going on. And so it's natural to be like, okay, it's 8 o'clock. It's cold outside. It's dark. Go to bed. So there's kind of some natural rhythms that you fall into. When it snows, that's a big deal, right? That's we're very susceptible to that. That's me getting out here and first thing in the morning, clearing off the snow panels. And that was, kind of an evolutionary thing. In the middle of that first winter, I was like, man, I need a winter array that's nearly vertical so there's not as much snow that has to be cleared first thing. And so, on the very day when we're more likely to need energy to keep the water lines, electrical energy, to keep the heated water line into the bathhouse hot, that's a day when we've got panels that are covered with snow, and I got to get out there and sweep them off just to get us up and running. This year, I do have a good generator with an electric start on it. And again, I'll go into more detail on this, but that already has been really nice to, like when we had that 5 days of rain, I would kick it on, 15 or 20 minutes before I wanted to take a shower. It would charge batteries while it was running. The shower wouldn't pull the batteries down at all. And in fact, I think it still would charge while I was showering. And so, I'd end up running it maybe 45 minutes or an hour, which would get the batteries, even though there wasn't really any sun, up to like 80%. And so that's a nice little, I don't know if I want to say saving grace, but that's something that helps. Reliability is the next thing that I talk about. So, reliability. Everybody wants to live off grid so that they're not dependent upon other people's infrastructure. Here's the thing, though. For every time that I've gotten a notice that there's a power outage down in town, there's been probably 10, maybe 20 times that I've wondered, like, how the batteries were outside. I've worried about whether or not I need to run the generator, or we've had an outright power outage because, I'd let the batteries slip too low, or, there'd been some kind of strange event. As far as water supply is concerned, I was getting cavalier about how long I was going between getting loads of water a couple weeks ago, and I ran the cistern out right in the middle of my wife's shower. So, from a reliability standpoint, even if we take away, everything that it took kind of getting it up and running, being in town in general is way more reliable. On the flip side, when something goes wrong in town, you're just waiting for somebody else to fix it. It is all hands on deck, usually, getting whatever it is fixed, and hopefully there's enough hands. Up here, it's Evan on deck. I mean, of course, I got friends, family I can call on, but in general, I'm the guy who put it all together up here. I'm the guy who knows how it works, and when something happens, like, let's say I ruin the on-demand hot water heater because I'm being dumb about electricity, and I have to get a replacement, and all of a sudden we're without hot running water until the next one arrives. I got to drop everything I'm doing to try to solve that problem, and life is interrupted, right? It's totally disruptive, and that did happen. part of it's just getting the system up and running and understanding how things are. I've replumbed the water delivery system out there 3 times. I think I've got it going well now. I think I've kind of figured out where the problems are and fixed those problems. We'll see how this winter goes. And, that's kind of another thing, circling back to the whole living closer to the land. Down in town, you never say, I wonder if we're going to be able to survive the winter. Now, up here, whether or not we're going to live through the winter is not in doubt, but just how hard the winter might be in terms of keeping things up and running, fixing problems, that's something that you think about. You don't ever think about it down in town, at least not, down in this town. So, that's, off grid. I'm not waiting on anybody else, but I'm maintaining spares of items I consider critical. I'm the guy who's got to fix them. I'm paying attention to every little thing. I'm constantly thinking through maintenance. So, what's more reliable? Being in town's more reliable. What's ultimately more reliable? Maybe being up here is ultimately more reliable. I do have a longer buffer, right? I'm not, down in town, I'm a power outage and that's it. I'm done, right? On a lot of things. Up here, I potentially would never have a power outage. Eventually, the batteries are going to lose their efficacy. Propane, once I run out of propane, it's all wood. And once I run out of gas to go get wood, what does that look like? So, a lot of the being independent is just straight up a fantasy. Okay, so more of the nuts and bolts of, what life looks like here. So we have a small fridge, a little bit bigger than a dorm fridge, but not much, that, kind of limits the amount of fresh food that we can have on hand. I've changed, like milk, I buy by the half gallon because it stores more easily. And that gives me a rotational system. When I'm out of a half gallon, I move the other one to the front. Then next time I'm in town, I grab another half gallon. So some of that's changed. Have a big chest freezer in which I could, and in fact have, stored like a quarter of a beef. So that's good. That builds that food buffer. I don't have to worry about that thing losing power because there's enough off of the sun for that. So I've kind of learned that frozen foods are easier here. Don't have a microwave. Frozen foods that I can skillet fry are like the quickest and easiest. Those are expensive things to get at the supermarket, but I have some of those on hand for something quick. Of course, if you plan ahead, then you thaw the meat from the freezer, and then we got ways to cook it. As far as cooking, I got a little outdoor grill, propane again. In here, I have a propane grill with a little oven, and I mean that's proven great, but it's all kind of stovetop cooking. And because I've got decent AC power in here, got a coffee grinder because I'm a coffee snob. Even have a blender and a toaster. Do not run the toaster at the same time that you're running the air conditioner because you will flip a breaker. These are the kinds of things that maybe we think of as a third world or whatever, but you don't think about whether or not you can run the toaster in town. Up here, am I going to be able to run the toaster, or am I going to flip a breaker? Or because the batteries have gotten low enough overnight over a cold night, is the inverter going to start complaining because I've asked it to run a toaster, and I'm going to hear a bunch of beeping out there because it feels overloaded because there's not enough juice left in the batteries. These are all kinds of things that you live with. As far as washing clothes is concerned, we have a washer, not a dryer. We line dry, which I've come to prefer. I kind of feel like clothing isn't clean until it's been cleaned by the sun and the wind. In the winter, that's problematic. Clothing has to dry inside of the shower house where I have a little catalytic heater. It stays warm enough in there that we can dry, but it takes a lot longer, and it's kind of a cramped space to try to line clothing out for drying. So that's how clothing takes place. And we have, like I said, we got a little shower out there. We end up washing dishes out there because I put in a nice double sink. Hand washing dishes, of course. In here, I have a little bit of running water, just courtesy of a marine foot pump, to a little mini sink that basically just vents right outside of the building. You know, you might wash your hands here, you might rinse out a dish here, but in general, anything significant, we're going to go out there to do it. I don't really even need this sink here, but this, like I said, everything evolves. This sink was here before the bathhouse was even contemplated. And so it was kind of the only way to do anything from a water standpoint. So that's the nuts and bolts. Overall, what do I think about living like this? If we had to live the rest of our life here, I would definitely put a toilet in here for my wife, and honestly for me, for middle of the winter. And it would have to go right where I am, and it would cut up our space, but it would work. But overall, you know, we both like something a little bit more substantial. And, you know, you could build around that. You could build an off-grid place that was all in one, that didn't have you walking across a potentially snowy dooryard to go to the bathhouse, that didn't have you walking outside. So, I mean, that's a solvable problem off-grid. On the flip side, living out here, I do like the closeness. It certainly makes you tougher. I'm more tolerant when I'm living out here to temperature swings. It makes me tougher mentally because it's just kind of a little bit harder. Life is harder in general up here. Not unbearable, not uncomfortable, but there's things that you get accustomed to dealing with that you don't ever have to deal with down in town. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the ability to live like that. I certainly appreciate the lower population density up here, which, you know, you could get a place on 40 acres and have a real house that's not off-grid. You know, that would solve the population density issue. But so that's all pros. I think if I was going to live here for the rest of my life, probably, I mean, there's power right across the road. Probably I would just get a temporary power pole over here and plug the buildings into that, which I've designed it to do that, just so I never had to worry about electricity. But yeah, it's been a great experiment. I'm happy to have it. It's definitely, in some ways, it's a fallback. 750 gallons of water, if you're not trying to shower and wash clothes with it, that lasts a long time as far as drinking water is concerned. So that's, you know, if I fill the freezer with somebody's beef from up here this fall, that's a good stock of food just sitting here. Being, you know, with the electricity we generate here, it's perpetually cold. The freezer is not the big electricity user. It's the water pump and air conditioning if we're running that. So there's a lot to be said for this. And, you know, if I was younger, that also, I think, maybe would make me more inclined. Oh, that's the repeater. We have a repeater on a ridge line over here that can bounce a signal down into town and vice versa. And so that's kind of our backup communication from up here down to town, really anywhere in the valley. So that's what that thing was. So at any rate, it's I have learned a lot. Certainly the lessons that we've learned up here, I'm going to be applying the rest of my life in other ways and places. And certainly we're going to treasure our time up here. There's a lot of good memories up here. And I'm looking forward to another winter up here that I think, thanks to the new generator, is going to just make it less stressful. And and when I almost have all the parts in for the stovepipe for the wood stove, adding a wood stove and a generator this winter should make this winter much more comfortable and livable, and frankly downright pleasant than the last winter that we spent up here was. Anyway, that's it for an overview of what we have going on right now. And like I said, I'll do a couple more, a deep dive on electricity, a deep dive on water, and there's so much detail. There's no way I could cover it in videos, or at least that I'm going to think to cover it in videos. So please, there's a link at the bottom of this for our forum, and I'll be answering any questions you might have on the forum. Happy to do that and take requests for other topics or subjects that maybe are worth putting on the video. But at any rate, this is, like I said at the beginning, this is a little bit outside the ordinary for our longhouse, but our longhouse instructional series. But I think it's in keeping with the ethos of the company and kind of the community that's grown up around the company. It's a bunch of folks interested in self-reliance, and so since I've spent a fair amount of time over the last couple of years learning more about what that really looks like from an infrastructure side, I hope y'all can benefit from some of the lessons that we've learned. Thank you for watching.